Tonight, unforced error after unforced error.
Do you support any restrictions on a person's right to contraception?
Well, we're looking at that, and I'm going to have a policy on that very shortly.
From flirting with Nazis to banning contraception, why Trump won't stop giving Joe Biden ammunition. Kids these days, from patriotism to happiness. America's kids would rather live somewhere else. What does the disconnect mean for America's future? And Newsom watch. California's green energy push sends gas prices soaring in the Golden State and Nevada and Arizona. Is Gavin Newsom swinging the West in Trump's favor? Welcome to the fairest show on television. First tonight, Michael Cohen says so. That is basically the prosecution's case against Donald Trump in the business records case. Today, both sides rested. It's over. Over the course of the trial, the prosecution called 20 witnesses for 50 hours of testimony. Trump's defense team had just 2 witnesses and 2 hours of testimony. During the testimony, we learned a lot. Nothing we didn't already know, but this is what they proved in court. Most likely, Trump slept with Stormy Daniels. And Daniels got paid $130,000 to keep quiet. Even Stormy's testimony seemed, maybe in a word, performative, but she is a performer. Fine. But sex and hush money payments aren't crimes. For a few hours next week, and who knows, it could be many hours, it could be just a couple, the 12 jurors will be the most important people in American politics. Closing arguments are set for Tuesday. And deliberations may come as early as Tuesday night. Who knows how long they could go. The jury has to decide if Donald Trump is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And we are going to hear an awful lot about the meaning of reasonable doubt over the next week. Here's Donald Trump after court.
The good news is they've not proven a case. There is no crime. Now, you're going to read all of these experts, and you know the ones that have to go over their names again, but all experts, legal scholars, talented people, very smart people, and there is no crime. So maybe they'll try and devise one right now. The judge will help them out, because the judge has been very helpful to the other side.
To be fair, for the jury to decide there's a crime, they must believe Michael Cohen whole cloth. Everything he says. Because without any other evidence, without any corroborating evidence, without any proof, Michael Cohen is the only thing that links Donald Trump to these payments and the falsification of the records. Trump's former lawyer and fixer testified to all sorts of bad things Donald Trump did. Michael Cohen also repeatedly said he wanted to see Michael Cohen repeatedly said he wanted to see Donald Trump in jail. Michael Cohen is an admitted perjurer. He's a convicted felon. On and on and on and on. But if people want to believe him, they can. He testified under oath that Trump falsified the business records and Trump ordered the payoff. Everything the prosecution wants and needs to prove came from Michael Cohen on the stand. But Cohen got caught in lie after lie after lie. With us now, jury consultant Robert Schwaford and Michael DeSharo, New York criminal defense attorney extraordinaire who has been with us throughout the duration. Michael, we will start with you. Before the jury gets the case, it is up to the judge to issue jury instructions. Do we know yet what actually the jury is going to have to find, the elements of the crime that they will have to find Donald Trump committed beyond a reasonable doubt?
We do not. As far as I know, the falsifying business documents, that's a standard jury charge in New York. You can read that. And that's been given thousands of times. The other crime, I'm curious to see how that jury instruction gets crafted and which theory of the prosecution it's going to go with. It is difficult to communicate to your viewers.
Michael, forgive me just because for those of us who are not completely in tune, you say the other crime and the falsifying business records has been done 1,000 times. This means that Donald Trump ordered the business records to be falsified. They've got to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And then what is the other crime?
In order to conceal or cover up another crime, when you read the statute of falsifying the business records, that's what's in there. So the prosecutors have a couple of different theories as to what that other crime is. I just don't know how it's going to be crafted, because jury instructions are often boring. We've done these cases 1,000 times. For example, selling narcotics is 22039. That's been on the books forever. It's been done 1,000 times. You really don't have a lot of play when it comes to jury instructions for the 99% of cases. This case is unique, though.
Yeah, well, no kidding, it's unique. Robert, how does that play to the jury, right? Because you're going to have a prosecutor and you're going to have a defense attorney on Tuesday, 3 hours for the prosecutor, 2 hours for a closing argument from the defense. Do you want to take that long for the jury?
So people's attention span is much shorter now. And our recommendation to lawyers is to not take all the time that you're entitled to. And really, you're not trying to persuade anyone at this point. People are either on your side at this point or they're not on your side. What you're primarily doing in a closing argument at this point is to empower the people on the jury who are already on your side. Give them the reasons to be able to make the argument back in the jury room.
All right, so, Michael, back in the jury room, and you've been pretty much spot on throughout this whole thing, even the night of the indictment coming down, you said this all rests on Michael Cohen. It all did rest on Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was, by all accounts, a complete disaster for the prosecution. Then Robert Costello got on the stand for the defense. He was probably a disaster for the defense just because he got into arguments with the judge and the like, not because of his testimony. But now you get to the jury and into the jury room. How do you see this jury? What has to happen for them to convict Donald Trump of anything?
There has to be, first of all, I don't think there's going to be a conviction. I don't think there's 12 people going to go either way. And I'd be curious to hear your other guests' opinion about the two attorneys that are in this. These two attorneys, to me, are critical. They're either going to make their own camps or they're going to join forces and go one way or another. I can't imagine, when you go to law school, credibility is everything. And appeals cases are done on credibility of the witnesses. That's never disturbed. I can't imagine these two attorneys saying, well, he's lied about everything else, but this time we should believe him. So they're going to be the ringleaders of this jury. And I think your other guest is dead on. It's people already have an opinion. Now it's time to hash it out in the jury room. I simply don't see 12 people going one way or the other.
All right, so Robert, what does that mean for these two attorneys? How do the lawyers, if you were advising the prosecution and the defense, how do the lawyers talk to the lawyers on the jury?
Well, the lawyers are going to be able to dig into the documents and actually deal with the documentary evidence, not just based on whether or not you believe someone or not believe someone. I mean, they're used to assembling pieces of evidence and connecting dots and making arguments, making inferences from pieces of evidence. So they're not going to be in a situation where they're just saying, well, who do you believe? I believe this person, you believe that person. And the other thing about the attorneys is whichever side they land on, they have the capacity to wear other people down. And so as a general rule, so I've picked over 500 juries in my career, and I've let lawyers be on maybe 7 of those cases in my career. And because if a lawyer is on your jury, someone made a mistake, one side or the other.
All right, so you're talking about jury 3, unmarried man works in corporate law, gets the news from the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Juror number 7, married with kids, works as a civil litigator, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, Washington Post, and NPR. Michael, this sounds like you're laying out the case for a very, very long deliberation until you end up with a hung jury if 12 people aren't going either way. That means we get to be here all next week speculating what's happening inside the jury room.
I imagine that's how it's going to be. The attorneys are going to have a huge advantage in terms of trying to push this jury, but this is not a typical jury. These are Manhattanites. A lot of these people are very highly educated, and simply because an attorney says something doesn't mean they're going to follow along, even in this type of case. So you may have different factions. When factions happen in jury trials, in the jury room, you're in for a long haul.
So, Robert, last question. You're the consultant. This all comes down, I think, to Michael Cohen and whether people believe him or not in order to get into the elements of the crime. If you're the prosecutors, how do you tell, if you're working for the prosecution, how do you tell the prosecutors to rehabilitate Michael Cohen in their closing arguments?
So I disagree with your premise. That it comes down to Michael Cohen. I think, as you said, the other guest, it's a very sophisticated group of people, and sophisticated groups of people they actually have the capacity to look at documentary evidence and connect dots and make logical inferences. They don't just have to have some kind of feeling, well, he lied about this, he's going to lie about everything else. And the one instruction that no one's mentioned, and that's the instruction that you are not to consider a defendant's failure to testify. So that's an instruction that is impossible to follow. It's just like Dostoevsky once said, don't think about a white polar bear. So what do you think about? Think about a white polar bear. And so Donald Trump, regardless of what the instruction says, his failure to testify is naturally going to bring up the view that there's a reason he didn't testify. And the reason he didn't testify is that you can't suborn perjury. You can't put your client on the stand and have them lie.
It's a great point. It is an excellent, excellent point. And Donald Trump famously said the only people who take the fifth are the mob, which not testifying is effectively taking the fifth. Gentlemen, all right, 7 days until jury deliberations begin, and then we get to all talk about what's happening in the jury room. Thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Lou.
Thanks for having us.
Generation lost, quite literally. New polling suggests America's youngest voters have values completely out of touch with the rest of America. Will America's kids ever come to love America? And residents in Eastern Oregon, well, they want to leave Oregon, redraw the map. They don't want to move to Idaho. They want to redraw the map and bring Idaho to them. Why their plan might actually work. For the first time, we're seeing just how differently young Americans view the world. We've all heard the saying from a parent about life back then. We walked both ways uphill in the snow to school. When they were a kid, things were different. Well, now they really are actually a lot different. Gen Z is less than half as likely as boomers to say they believe in patriotism or belief in God, or having children are very important. Look at that. Patriotism, only 32% say patriotism is important. Just 40% of those ages, 18 to 29, think capitalism is a good thing. All right. 73% of those 65 plus believe in it. Similarly, 44% of 18 to 29-year-olds have a positive impression of socialism. So among Gen Z, they like socialism more than capitalism. And they're a lot more likely to side with terrorists. 80% of Americans overall support Israel versus 20% who support Hamas. 18 to 24-year-olds, 57 support Israel, 43% support Hamas. Jean Twenge is with us. Her book is called Generations, The Real Differences Between Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, Boomers, and Silence, and what they mean for America's future. I'll let you answer your own question first, or your own statement first. What does it mean for America's future?
Well, as you can see, there's a lot of really big generational differences these days in politics. So Gen Z is just a lot less connected to institutions, whether that's religion or government. And there's a tremendous amount of pessimism among young adults today. We usually think of young adults as being very optimistic and forward-looking. That is really not true today. More Gen Z young adults say that they don't have any hope for the world, that their expectations for their own lives are much lower.
So how much of that has been because they've been told not to have any hope, right? Because they've been told by one political party that they're all victims and racism is terrible in America, and another political party says that other political party is out to get you because you cling to your guns and religion.
I think there's a number of factors here. So what you're mentioning, political polarization, egged on by social media, absolutely in there, where you have the two sides hating each other, and then the angry content spreads faster on social media. We know that from lots of studies. There's another element here too, though, which is Gen Z is a lot more likely to be depressed than previous generations at the same age. And depression isn't just about emotions. It's also about cognition. It's about how you see the world. And when you're sad, when you're depressed, you see the world in a negative light. And you
absolutely. But how much of that is the negative light because they're being told to see it in a negative light? How much of that is because the idea of personal responsibility is going by the wayside? The celebration of normalcy or of adequacy is now something that happens every day with participation trophies. How much of it is it that people are being held to so much lower standards, they don't have a reason to be inspired?
Well, I think that's been going on for quite a while, certainly since the 90s, and the millennials who grew up in that era, in the 90s and the 2000s, when we had a lot of those same trends, were very optimistic, and they had very high expectations, and they weren't as pessimistic about the state of the world. So there's clearly something else going on that has divided these generations. And I think that level of depression and the rise of social media are two possible causes.
Okay, so understanding that, but fair to say, right, that each generation collectively has been more and more coddled, right? Things have gotten easier and easier. Just if you look at every generation has had it better. Is that part of the problem?
Well, it depends on how you define coddling. So if you think about things like how technology has made our lives easier and how parents are probably nicer to their kids now than they used to be, sure. But when you consider that average teen is spending a ton of time on social media, partially because nobody's getting together with their friends anymore in person, so they get depressed. This is not an easy time to live when it seems mandatory to be on social media, and then you go on there and it's all of this terrible content, and then you're not hanging out with your friends in person like previous generations did.
Look,
so
I deleted
really
social media.
Out.
Yeah, I deleted Instagram a week and a half ago. I feel infinitely better. So it's not just kids. I'll grant you that. But at the same time, you said that belief in institutions has gone away, right? In family, sort of celebration of families gone away. Church has gone away. Various organizations have been sort of torn down. But also norms have been torn down, right? In terms of patriotism is no longer celebrated. It's no longer celebrated. What it means to be an American is something we can all agree on. And there's an interesting book about the revenge of the populist normies. It's a piece that just came out in the Free Press. That there's been some very influential, and we'll call them elites, in sort of thought leaders, especially ones that have been on the left, that have torn down and attacked so many of those norms that held us all together.
Right. So we have more individualism, more focus on the self, less on social rules. That grows naturally out of technology. It has some big upsides like equality. It also had some enormous downsides like disconnection, not as much respect for institutions. Nobody knows what the rules are anymore, that we don't have something to believe in anymore. So then it's all up to the self. And that is not a good formula for mental health and optimism.
Fair enough on all points. It's one of the most fascinating conversations we've had in a long time. This is great. So I'm going to take a little more time here. One of the things we put up was people who believe in socialism versus capitalism, right? In patriotism. If you got only a third of Gen Z believing in patriotism and a plurality of them believing in socialism, that doesn't bode well. Never mind they're responsible for all of our Medicare and Social Security at some point, earning that money. But that part aside, I think you've earned the right in your analysis to give us a prescription for how to get back to an America that we love and a group of young people that are inspired for America.
Yeah. And these polls are not alone. There's other polls showing that young people, compared to previous generations, are more likely to say America is an unfair society, that we need to basically start over with government. So we've got our work cut out for us, trying to give Gen Z some purpose and some hope. I do think that getting phones out of schools and making sure that we don't have young children and young teens on social media, maybe raising the age to 16, then maybe they'll start hanging out with each other more in person and be a lot less depressed and pessimistic.
Professor, what a wonderful conversation. Thank you. We're going to have you back because there's so many of the problems in America that intersect right in the place that we've been talking about for the past few minutes. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. If Donald Trump loses in November, he will have no one but himself to blame. Why a man doing so well in the polls keeps celebrating Nazis and restricting birth control. President Biden just released his response to a Trump social media post. In the social media post, there was a video that Donald Trump posted that celebrated Nazi-like rule if Donald Trump wins. Here's Joe Biden.
Is this on his official account? Wow. A unified Reich? That's Hitler's language. That's not America's. He cares about holding on to power. I care about you.
It's an effective ad. Of course, the truth is a little more complicated. To be very fair, here is the video Trump posted, or someone with access to Trump's account posted on his social media.
What happens after Donald Trump wins? What's next for America? The economy booms. American energy is unleashed and an end to crushing taxes. The border is closed and the largest deportation in history is underway.
Strength significantly increased by the creation of a unified Reich. That was in the headlines in the background. It's a clear reference to Nazi Germany. He since deleted the video. And look, to be fair, Trump isn't a Nazi. He's not a Nazi sympathizer. But he and his campaign cannot stop the unforced errors. That was yesterday. Here's another one in a TV interview that aired today.
Do you support any restrictions on a person's right to contraception?
Well, we're looking at that, and I'm going to have a policy on that very shortly. And I think it's something that you'll find interesting.
That got picked up everywhere. Trump considers contraception restrictions. Then Trump called reporting about his interview a lie. Eric Erickson's here, host of the nationally syndicated Eric Erickson Show, author of the best conservative newsletter. Visit ericerickson.com to subscribe. It is good to see you, my friend. Can Donald Trump ever get out of his own way?
No. Yeah, in absolute fairness, there's a website I've used myself that you can buy templates for videos and websites, and it's anyone internationally can, and anyone submits it. And it looks like somebody just found some sort of classic news reference and put it into a video, and well, doesn't matter. They should have paid attention to the word choices in it, and then to put it on. Now, they say a staffer did it, considering it was during lunch break of the trial. Maybe it was him. I don't know. But it's just yet another conversation about Donald Trump and his authoritarian nature. It plays into the Democrats' narrative, and it's an unforced error by the campaign.
That was unforced error number one. And look, people make mistakes on social media. People don't look at every little headline in the background and go through it with a microscope. And look, to be fair, we even had to pull it out and highlight it for anybody to see it. Fine. That said, the interview today about contraception was not something like that. That was Donald Trump being asked a direct question. And then he went on to say, we're going to have a policy about that and I'll consider it. And then went on to claim, I'll never support trying to ban or limit contraception. If he loses in November, how much is his unforced errors, to use your words and mine, going to have to do with it?
Oh, I think overwhelmingly. I mean, even Democrats are starting to realize the polling's probably not wrong. He's doing very well in swing states, even with Democratic pollsters. You've got James Carville out there warning that they're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks like spaghetti, and nothing is. These begin to stick. They begin to play into the Democratic narrative about abortion restrictions and his authoritarian nature. The two unforced errors, and this is what I find just most amazing about it, the two unforced errors that he's made play into the two chief Democratic attacks against him. It's as if Biden came out tomorrow and said 9% inflation's no big deal. That would play into the Republicans' hands, except he's not going to do that.
Well, right. He's a lot better to be on message. He's a lot more disciplined, sort of. And when he's on the teleprompter, he's there. And look, they don't put him out nearly as much as they do Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump does multiple interviews on multiple days of the week. Joe Biden does not. The complaint from Republicans, right, is that the media is unfair. And to be fair, the media sort of blew up the unified right thing in a way that isn't anywhere close to what it really was, and likely what Donald Trump, or if anybody, meant about it. That said, does complaining about the media work for swing voters in a state like Georgia?
No, everyone already factors in that the media is unfair, and yet he was still able to win in 2016. He's got to move on to other things. Frankly, this trial in New York did him a favor. It kept him busy every day so that he couldn't do a lot of these sit-down interviews. He had to stay on message, make a short statement before he went into the courtroom, and the same when he came out of the courtroom. The more he does these sorts of interviews, the more he freeforms it, the more he gets into trouble. So they need to make sure he has some rote, memorized answers when he gets asked these questions.
You and I were talking in the break. You predict either a hung jury or a not guilty verdict. Fair enough. You think it's going to be a long deliberation or a short deliberation?
I can't foresee it being a long deliberation. Maybe it will, but you've got three lawyers on the jury. They may play it out a little bit, but it just, I watched the trial. I watched the commentary of the trial, I should say, and Michael Cohen's testimony, I think, just really undercuts the prosecution so badly. It was a bad case to bring anyway, given how they tried it.
Is it going to be a good political thing or a bad political thing if Trump's found not guilty?
I think Donald Trump goes up in the polling. Listen, he went up in the polling for Republicans when Alvin Bragg indicted him. I think he goes up in the public's mind if he's found not guilty. There are, in a number of polls, including the Harvard-Harris poll and several others, a plurality of voters who believe Democrats use lawfare against him. If he's found not guilty, that's just going to reinforce that idea with not Republicans, independents, that the Democrats are trying to stop him with judges because they can't beat him at the ballot box.
Eric, we always appreciate your commentary, and we're also very glad to have heard today that your wife's lung cancer scans came back clear. She had stage 4 lung cancer. It'd be hard to imagine to have a better friend and champion by her side than you. We followed the journey, as I know a lot of our viewers and your listeners have on social media. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and congratulations to your daughter on graduation. Wonderful times ahead. It's worth celebrating. We'll talk soon, my friend. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, speaking of friends, with friends like California Governor Gavin Newsom, well, President Biden may not need enemies. Newsom, like many progressives, wants to wipe out the use of fossil fuels, particularly gasoline. Fair enough. And he's doing it. New bills, policies, and lawsuits are driving California gas prices through the roof. It is by far the most expensive gas in the country. And that stinks for California drivers, but it's also terrible news for President Biden's reelection. Here's why. The Wall Street Journal reports, here's the rub. California refineries supply nearly 90% of Nevada's gasoline and half of Arizona's. Gasoline prices in Nevada, $4.38 a gallon, and Arizona, $3.90, tend to rise in tandem with those in California. Hence, the economic fallout from Sacramento's unrelenting assault on the oil industry also harms Arizonans and Nevadans. Arizona and Nevada are also among the 7 swing states that will decide this year's presidential election. And their voters rank inflation in the economy as the number 1 and number 2 issue there. So remember Putin's price hike? The last time gas prices spiked, well, we all learned that rising gas prices raises all prices: groceries, labor, fast food, construction materials. So just look what's happened to fast food prices. The same Big Mac that was $3.99 in 2019 is now $7.49. McChicken was $1.29, now it's $3.89. The dollar cheeseburger isn't $1 anymore, it is $3.15. And Gavin Newsom keeps trying to raise gas prices daily. He will tell you that, he celebrates that. President Biden faces a similar problem to Newsom, where climate orthodoxy requires policies that crush working class voters. That's the big picture. Just today, though, the Biden administration announced they will release 1 million barrels of gallons in the Northeast Reserve between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Really good timing if you want to make a tiny dent in gas prices before the election. Now, the amount of oil, the amount of gas being released is a drop in the bucket. But those million barrels are coming from what is called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. You'll notice I didn't say the Strategic Political Reserve, because this decision is entirely about politics in California and nationally.
We're shortly going to be energy dominant, and now he has to go into what's called the strategic reserves to give oil and gasoline essentially for cars, so they don't have to go up to $7, $8, $9 a barrel.
All right, so you couldn't hear what Donald Trump said. He said that prices were going to $7, $8, or $9 a gallon. And prices like that are something only Gavin Newsom could love. Speaking of Donald Trump, he talks about immigration at every rally, talked about it today in court. Democrats still have a new plan to flip the script. We'll tell you why it might work. In America, it's crime, it's the fentanyl crisis, it's the overrun of hospitals. There are an awful lot of problems. There's the shelter issue. The list goes on and on. Just ask Donald Trump.
I don't know if you've seen, but the border, record numbers of people from prisons, from jails, from mental institutions, terrorists, record numbers of people are pouring into our country. Numbers like we've never seen before are pouring in. We have an incompetent president, and we have to win.
Well, President Biden and Democrats say they want to do something about it. There's going to be a vote in the United States Senate on Thursday. Republicans got to get to 60 in the Senate. Republicans in the Senate say they have no interest in Democratic plans. One of them, Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, member of Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. Senator, it's good to see you. Thank you. I'm going to play for you right now Chuck Schumer, the Democratic majority leader in the Senate, with his thoughts. Take a listen.
We will try to do something. Again, our Republican colleagues have long claimed to have desperately wanted, securing our southern border. This Thursday, the Senate will vote on the bipartisan border bill. All those who say we need to act on the border will get a chance to show this week that they're serious about fixing the problem. They'll get a chance to show whether they're just talking points to them or whether they want to improve the status quo.
Is there a reason he's wrong, Senator?
Yeah, that bill would have been worse than doing nothing. The quote you should have had from Schumer was, after it failed, same bill failed in February, he said, we were playing chess, they were playing checkers, and we got our Ukraine bill. They went on to say, and we're in a lot better shape on the border than we were 3 months ago. So first of all, if you're entering good faith negotiation, you wouldn't rub your negotiating partner's nose in its failure. And if he was serious about securing the border, he wouldn't be saying we're in better shape. All he was looking for was political cover. When Democrats say they want to secure the border, what they're talking about is they want to more efficiently encounter, process, and disperse illegal immigrants that have no valid asylum claim throughout America. That's what they've been doing for the last 3 years. They want an open border. They caused this problem. And the last point I'll make is President Biden has the authority. President Trump had the authority, and he closed the border. President Biden used that exact same authority, and he opened it up. So he has the authority to secure the border. He just doesn't want to. If he wants strengthened authority, Republicans would be more than happy to do it. But this bill actually reduces the authority by setting a 4,000 migrant threshold to give him the discretion. So that would imply the president doesn't have the authority. That would codify that he doesn't have the authority, and then they take it away after 3 years. which is why I say passing that bill would have been worse than doing nothing.
I completely understand all the problems you have with this bill, and I think reasonable people can agree that it doesn't go all the way to securing the border. Some people have said that it goes far enough. This would be my question, though. Republicans in 2017 had the White House with Donald Trump. They had the House, they had the Senate, and still couldn't get any kind of meaningful immigration reform. It seems as though Republicans' argument is elect Donald Trump so he can go ahead with executive orders that are just going to get challenged again in the courts.
Leland, that is because Democrats don't want to secure the border. They want an open border. And so they wouldn't pass a tough border security bill. Happy to pass some kind of immigration bill and provide amnesty to DACA recipients without securing the border. President Trump, again, using the authority he has, secured the border. He went from his peak of about 5,000 people a day. Again, that was all caused by the lawless DACA orders. That's what's been causing this crisis. But just sheer willpower. Remain in Mexico, safe third country, some other things. He secured the border in 12 months. President Biden,
you're 100%. You are 100% right that once everything came in, you ended up once all of the Trump executive orders took effect, it slowed to a trickle. You're 100% correct about that. And I will give you the last word here, though. Government is about compromise, right? And if Republicans want meaningful change that isn't going to just change with the next administration 4 years from now when Donald Trump leaves office, aren't you guys going to have to compromise with Democrats and come up with some kind of bill that's not perfect? It's not exactly what you want?
Well, I think we would have. If we would have kept the border secure, I was working with the Trump administration. We had a really good legal immigration bill, would have taken care of DACA. But again, we never got to that point because Trump didn't win re-election, and then Biden opened up the border. Again, Democrats don't want a secure border. They opened it up. They caused this problem. So you can't negotiate with them in good faith. Again, go back to Schumer's quote. We're playing checkers. We're playing chess. They're playing checkers. And we got what we wanted, the Ukraine bill. So again, he's not serious. All they wanted was political cover. And unfortunately, McConnell gave it to him.
Well, and they're getting a lot of political cover on it. Senator, we always appreciate you being here. Any Democrats always welcome to come on and discuss it as well. We always admire you're willing to come and chat with us. Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Normally, when you want to change states, right, when you want to go from one state to another, you move. But conservative farmers in Oregon want to move the border and become part of Idaho. How exactly do you move a state border? Might happen when we come back. If you think about Oregon and Idaho, they don't have much in common. Think oat milk drinking hippies in Portland and lumberjacks in Idaho. I'm simplifying, but you get the idea. Now the lumberjacks, or at least the farmers in Oregon, want to leave the hippies and join Idaho. On your TV is the proposed Greater Idaho Plan. Farmers in eastern Oregon want to carve off the part of eastern Oregon and join Idaho. They cite conflicting social policies, views on crime, and if their secession is successful, Oregon's border would shift 200 miles to the west. Many of the counties in Greater Idaho, meaning the parts of Oregon, have already approved the plan. Another county will decide today in a non-binding vote. Executive Director of Greater Idaho, Matt McCaw, joins us now. Matt lives in the part of Oregon that would join Idaho. Makes sense. Matt, thanks for being here. How do you go from these non-binding votes that counties say, hey, this might be a good idea, to actually joining Idaho?
Yeah, so any two states can change where their border's at. And there's a process for that, and it's called the Interstate Compact. So any two state legislatures of bordering states can move the border to where it actually makes sense. So what we've been doing as an organization is going directly to voters and saying, do you want your elected leaders to pursue changing the border between Idaho and Oregon so that these eastern Oregon counties, which overwhelmingly vote like Idaho does, make a living like Idahoans do, and have cultural values similar to Idaho, that they could get their state government from Idaho instead of from Oregon? And we've gone to 12 counties in eastern Oregon. All 12 counties have passed measures saying, yes, we want our elected leaders to do that. We're hoping to get a 13th today. And what those do is that tells the legislature the people are behind this. They want their representatives, their elected leaders, to begin border talks and see if it makes sense to move that border.
So why would Idaho want you?
Well, there's a lot of advantages to Idaho to taking on Eastern Oregon. So the biggest thing is that Eastern Oregon is like Idaho in almost every way. Geographically, economically, socially, culturally, politically, they vote the same way. So taking all this land and resources into the state of Idaho would help their tax base. It would give them 400,000 like-minded voters that vote the same way they do. It would push Oregon law 200 miles away that Idahoans don't like very loose drug laws that go right up to within 45 minutes of Boise. That drug law would be pushed 200 miles west. There's a lot of advantages for the state of Idaho. And citizens and legislators see it. So I have to ask you sort of
in a broad brush here about really what this kind of does. If we put up the graphic of the hat that you guys have, and you just look at this for a moment, we'll put up actually the hat with the red logo there. It oddly looks like a gesture one might make with their hand. Is there a coincidence here, or was this by design?
You know what? You can see whatever you want to see out of that. We see a thumbs up. We're a good idea. We're a solution to a longstanding problem that people support.
All right. Well, you know, Matt, you passed the first test. That's spin from a politician right there. Keep at it. Come back and talk to us as this goes on. It's a fascinating story. And look, you're trying to make change the old-fashioned way. Good luck.
Thank you, Leland.
Yeah, Matt, thank you. We appreciate it. We wrote about this story first in War Notes. That is our daily newsletter that goes out every day at 4:05 p.m. Eastern. You get a first look at the stories we think are most important, some of our thoughts. You can respond to the email. And you can also get in touch with us on social media at Leland Vittert, on Instagram and on Twitter. That's warnotes.com to subscribe for free.